So during this summer, we have been taking some time to talk about the transition of early Israel's formation from a tribal system to a unified kingdom under a king's rule. And we've been doing that by listening to the stories about the leaders. And these stories are basically a series, in my opinion, a series of rise and fall. Rise and fall. We heard about the beautiful story of Samuel answering God's call in the middle of night as a child. And then we saw Israel's leaders teaming up against him, asking for a new leader because his sons were pretty much a screw up. And then we heard about Saul, once described as the best-looking person in Israel, being anointed as the very first king of Israel. And we later heard the fall of Saul, becoming paranoid about the rising power of new and younger leader David. And of course, the rise of King David, a young shepherd, the chosen one among all of his brothers, a great general, the ancestor of Jesus Christ. And we also heard the story of his affair with Bathsheba and plotting to kill her husband in order to cover up his mistake, his shame. And after 40 years of rule over Israel, we see a similar scene as the one of Samuel's, where his many sons were continuously in conflict with each other over power. Last week, we talked about the tragedy about David being pushed out from Jerusalem by his own son, Absalom, who was furious about his half-brother Amnon, who raped his sister, Tamar. And in the process of reclaiming Jerusalem, Absalom had to be killed by his father David's army. So we heard about the fall also. So I learned a lot. By having this opportunity to read and study these famous biblical names once again during the summer, I learned that these names, the names that we always related as God's persons, God's anointed, the family line of Jesus Christ our Savior, they were pretty messed up. There were so much politics, there were so much power cravings, there were so much murders and other forms of crimes. The women were being mistreated over and over in these stories. It's like a double-sided coin. Both sides are part of the whole story, but until we pick it up and look at the other side, we only see one side of the story. And a lot of times we want to leave it on the side that we want to see, right? The beautiful side, the pleasant side, the victorious side. The rise of King Solomon, who was famous for his wisdom, was not much different. And during my research, I got across this essay by a writer named Debbie Thomas. And I thought it really captured this paradox really well. And I'd like to share a portion of it with you. It goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a wise prince. Following his father's death, the prince assumed his divinely appointed throne, married a beautiful princess from a neighboring kingdom, and settled down to govern his people to the glory of God. Soon afterwards, God appeared to him in a dream and promised to grant the young royal whatever his heart desired. Being a humble man, the king refused to ask for wealth or power or long life, and instead replied thus, I am only a child. Therefore give your servant an understanding mind to govern your people and to discern between good and evil. God was so pleased with the king's request, he promised not only to grant it, to make this king the wisest human being in history, but to grant him every other measure of greatness as well. Untold wealth, matchless honor, and long life. In time, the king's reputation for brilliance spread across the land. Nobles traveled from distant shores to hear his pithy sayings and witness his wise judgments. In accordance with his wisdom and God's blessing, the king's wealth and power grew beyond measure. He made strategic political and economic alliances, maintained fleets of ships, built gorgeous temples and palaces, traded in luxuries such as gold, silver, and ivory, penned the greatest wisdom literature of his name, presided over the golden age of his kingdom, and finally handed over the throne to his son after a peaceable reign of 40 years. And then here goes another version. Once upon a time, there was a shrewd prince. Following the death of the king, the prince ordered the murder of his older brother, the rightful heir, and assumed his father's throne with blood on his hands. He spent the earliest days of his reign carrying out the vengeance killings his fathers had requested before his death. Then, believing himself to have divine wisdom and a divine mandate, he set out to build the kingdom of his dreams, a kingdom of wealth, prestige, and power. The king's appetites were beyond excessive. To support his extravagant lifestyle, he levied taxes his subjects could not bear. To control knowledge, he gathered the surrounding world's wisdom traditions to himself. To complete his lavish building projects, he conscripted thousands of people into forced labor. To satisfy his desires, he assembled a harem of 700 wives and 300 concubines. To quell his spiritual restlessness, he constructed pagan shrines and offered worship to gods who demanded child sacrifice. The results of his choices were dire. By the end of his reign, his people could no longer bear the crushing burdens of taxation and slavery he had placed upon them. In the wake of his paganism, they could no longer differentiate between idolatry and worship. Because he had monopolized God to justify his personal brand of wisdom, his subjects had nowhere to turn for divine discernment and reparation. Soon the king found himself confronted by enemies. Though he attempted to fight back, God's hand was against him, and he enjoyed little success. He died shortly thereafter, denying the long life he had dreamed of. His son then tried to force the disgruntled masses back into servitude, but they resisted, and the civil war that would last for decades broke out across the land. The kingdom split in two, and the famed king's once golden dream dissolved into chaos. By any measure, not a happily ever after story. So, the question is, which story is true? Who was King Solomon? A sage or a fool? A noble or a glutton? A leader or a tyrant? And then she goes on to make her point. She says, I started this essay dividing Solomon's story into two parts, the good and the bad, the noble and the shameful. But the wonderful thing about the Bible, if we're willing to liberate it from the bondage of literalism, is that it refuses to distort reality in such an unhelpful way. The Solomon of the Bible is a human being, which is to say, he is a paradox. Blessed with wisdom and cursed with foolishness, devoted to God and attracted to idols, committed to his intellect and shackled to his appetites. So it's this lens that views human life as a paradox. I would like us to listen to this part of Solomon's prayer from today's reading. And it comes from chapter 3, verse 7. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. In the wake of that paradox, this is a very honest prayer. What this is teaching us is that we need to understand where you are, understand where life and power originate. And when we talk about wisdom of Solomon, it may not be just about how wisely he judged the situation of two women claiming a baby as theirs. You know that story. But I think it's more about that understanding, that ability to view life with a larger perspective, that ability and willingness to view the ups and downs of life in God's perspective. I think that's what Solomon's wisdom was all about. Since we played guitar today, I want to talk about guitar a little bit. I remember a line from an interview with the legendary guitarist Andres Segovia, where he says, Guitar is like an orchestra to which we could look with the reverse side of binoculars. You know how binoculars when you look reverse side? Guitar is like an orchestra to which we could look with the reverse side of binoculars, but in smaller sound sides. It says, it has many, many different colors. It is not really as listening to music when you're playing guitar, but it is about dreaming with music. So I love about that. I don't know about other instruments, but with guitar, I like that line. And I thought that was a great image. So perhaps what we can learn from these rise and fall by God's people in the scripture is that it's not just about being able to embrace the other side of a coin, but it is about being able to view our lives from the reverse side of the binoculars, to view that beauty that comes from diversity. So I pray that each of us can remember to view our hardships, our situations, our challenges, our problems to solve, or if I may, our life in whole as a human being. To be reminded to view it through the reverse side of the binoculars. And when we do that, I believe that we will be granted wisdom, Solomon's wisdom, that God is the origin of this life. And I would like to end this time by sharing how the writer Thomas ends her essay by trying to rewrite the tale again for the audience. And it goes like this. Let's try this again. Once upon a time, there was a king. He had big dreams, as most of us do. He had great faults, as most of us do. He lived a life marked by success and failure, nobility and disgrace. He loved God, and he didn't. He pleased God, and he didn't. He left a legacy that was neither perfect nor wretched, as most of us will. But he was loved by God throughout, even when his foolish wisdom shattered God's heart. As